All right, my name is Danny O'Donnell. I'm with BloodyElbow.com, and I'm here with UFC lead commentator and co-host of the Anik and Florian podcast, Jon Anik. So thanks, John, for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Good to see you, Danny. My pleasure.
So UFC is off to a really awesome start in 2022. We're coming off a really exciting pay-per-view that had 2 title fights. I wanted to start off talking about Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo. They obviously had the 2 fights leading into this one. The first one was really close. The second one, Moreno got the finish. So do you want to talk a little bit about your thoughts on the third fight and where you think these 2 guys go from here?
Well, I don't want to piss off any of the other flyweights like Kai Kara-France and Askar Askarov, but I do think we need finality. We need closure. We're 1-1-1 between these 2 fighters. I think they're pretty evenly matched. Obviously, the third fight was very close. When I'm calling a fight, it's hard to really insert my scorecard into the conversation, right? Because I'm dealing with producers. There might be a 45-second gap during a round where I'm dealing strictly with a producer and maybe I'm not even calling the action, if you can believe that. So I would toss my scorecard out. But I remember after the fight thinking that it was very close and thinking that amazingly, after a trilogy that we thought was completed, we don't really have that closure. So I think they need to fight a 4th time. I love the fact that Davison Figueiredo kind of raised the stakes and said, I'll come to Tijuana to fight you. I thought that was a really nice stroke by Figueiredo because he's not trying to control the variables. He wants to prove that he's the better guy by going to Mexico. I will say, I think it's going to be really hard for Figueiredo to consistently keep his body optimally competing in this weight class. As great a visual as it was, Danny, that he ran up the stairs and hit 124 pounds, I just think that it's asking a lot of himself to be so disciplined year round. And I do think eventually, before his career is said and done, you are going to see Figueiredo up at bantamweight. But first, I think we need finality here with Moreno.
Yeah, I totally agree. The fight, all the fights were really close. Taking away the second one where Moreno got the finish, first 2, or the first one and this last one were super close. And I definitely agree. I think we need some finality with that one. So I wanted to talk about Ngannou and Cyril Gane as well. Ngannou came into the fight with a ton of pressure on his shoulders. Obviously, there's talk of the knee injury, the prior training that he did with Gane, the contract stuff. So what was your opinion on Francis Ngannou's performance and how he pulled out some new tricks in this fight?
I'm so happy for him. You know, we knew he was dealing with the knee injury. We didn't know how serious it was, but one of my UFC colleagues said to him a couple weeks before the fight, she saw him in a sleeve and she said, is your knee going to be okay? And he sort of humbly said, I hope so. And certainly he was able to get through the fight. Obviously, he's not the quickest guy in the world on his feet. I don't have to tell you that, given the way he's built and given the way you watch this sport. But I thought even early on in the fight, he looked like he was stuck in the mud, like right out of the chute, that he was hesitant to kind of pull the trigger. So to see him lean on the wrestling and grappling to defend his title was absolutely awesome. I think for Cyril Gane, there are a lot of question marks now. I think he needs to go back to the well and really address some of the weaknesses that I think Francis Ngannou was able to expose. But Ngannou's 35 years old, and now he's dealing with a major injury and the accompanying surgery. So I think there are a lot of question marks on the Ngannou side as well. But I do think that Ngannou was dealing with a whole lot of pressure. He was dealing with the injury, and given all of those variables, for him to be able to sort of pass that test and win a fight by decision for the first time in his career over 25 minutes is pretty heady stuff. So I have a great personal relationship with him and his team, and I'm really happy that he was able to persevere.
Absolutely. The most impressive thing to me about that fight was he dropped some early rounds, and then he was able to come back and win using a completely different skill set that he hasn't been able to showcase in the octagon before.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, to be sitting on the stool down 2-0 with a bum knee, knowing you need 3 rounds, and to be able to lean on those newly acquired skills. You know, I would also just add quickly that it's not as though he's been doing nothing. You know, it seems to be that there's this public perception that he's dicking around and going to Cameroon to trot around with the belt. He's been working, and he has 14 UFC fights now, to his credit, and the training camps that have accompanied those 14 UFC fights. So I think it's about time he gets a modicum of credit for being the hard worker that his teammates know him to be.
Absolutely. So that was a great pay-per-view to start the year. We got some other awesome events coming up. Next up is a fight night where the main event is going to be Jack Hermansson versus Sean Strickland. What are your thoughts on that fight? Obviously, Strickland's coming into it on a 5-fight winning streak. He's been looking really impressive. Hermansson's 2-2 in his last 4, but he's been facing some of the top competitors in the welterweight divisions, or the middleweight division, excuse me. So what are your thoughts on that fight going into this weekend?
I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight. I'm kind of happy to not get the assignment so I can just watch it play out. You know, Sean Strickland for a long time has had one of these shiny records, 17-1, 18-2. And, you know, it seemed to be for a while, either at welterweight or middleweight, that's where all winning streaks went to die. You draw Sean Strickland and there goes your winning streak. So it's nice to see him elevated now, competing in main events. Obviously, he has a personality that I think is polarizing. And I think he brings a lot of people to the table with things that he says and things that he does. Excuse me. I think he deserves the distinction as about a 2-1 favorite, which is where he's at right now on DraftKings. But Jack Hermansson's a dog too. I mean, we got a little 25-foot octagon at the UFC Apex. I think that Hermansson's going to try to make this a dog fight. I wouldn't be surprised to see him try to grapple early. And as much as we talk about the nastiness with Strickland and the mean streak, Hermansson's got all of those things as well. So I think it's really good matchmaking by the UFC. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the next title challenger potentially emerge out of this matchup. So it's a big fight, and it's happening at a time when the belt is also going to be on the line in this division a week later. So it's a huge opportunity, obviously, for both guys. And I'm excited to just kind of lay back and see who takes advantage.
Yeah, big things coming up in the middleweight division. Really excited for that. And obviously the title fight coming up after that. So I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the preparation that you do for fights, because you're known as one of the guys who does the absolute most preparation. I would say you and Dominic Cruz come into the fights doing the most research and background, accumulating as much background knowledge as you can. So can you talk a little bit about the research that you put into each of the fights, whether it's pay-per-view or fight night, or just all the background information you have to gather to really come in feeling prepared?
Well, it's a good question and a good time for us to be having this conversation, because we're essentially 10 days out from a pay-per-view right now. So this is when my process starts, voicing some of the combo features that maybe you'll hear in the arena. We pre-voice all of those elements, and then just starting on the fighter prep, because I have 30 fighters to prepare. And once I get to fight week next week, there are a lot of different demands on my time and things that will come up randomly, whether it's media requests or otherwise. And sometimes I'll lose big chunks of a day. So I start my process 10 days out. I have a little bit of an antiquated system. I handwrite all of my fighter cards, but that kind of helps me study and commit those things to memory. And then I go right into a UFC fight night the following week with 28 more athletes. So there's not a lot of time to sort of digest this performance and these results before we sort of bang it into the next one. Like, I'll literally be in Houston, Texas next Wednesday or Thursday, voicing the Rafael Fiziev, Rafael Dos Anjos show. So sometimes that's a challenge. You got 58 athletes in a short amount of time, and it all can run together. But, you know, I love the preparation. You know, every time I'm writing a fighter card, like my 27th fighter card, and I have a dimple on my middle finger, you know, I could have blisters all over my hands digging ditches. Like, I've worked as a landscaper. I've worked as an electrician's assistant. I've done manual labor for years. So I try to be thankful that I'm working in sports and that I essentially have my dream job. But I'd be lying to you, Danny, if I said there weren't certain weeks in a back-to-back when I'm on my 28th fighter. And it's just like, man, this is a lot, you know, but it's the devil I know. And thankfully now I have 10 years to sort of refine my system. And I guess it hasn't failed me yet.
Absolutely. So one thing I think that was really interesting that you talked about on the last Anik and Florian podcast was how, since you don't come from the fighting background, there's a little bit less slack for a commentator who doesn't have all that experience in the ring. So can you talk about how you manage that and how you've been able to overcome that and add so much value to the broadcast without having that in-cage experience?
Well, I appreciate you saying that, man. You know, we were joking with Ray Longo because he was sort of, you know, ribbing Kenny Florian, being like, dude, why don't you meet Anik halfway with the preparation? And I came to my guy Kenny's defense and I said, hey, this dude fought for the UFC title 3 times. I've never been in so much as an amateur mixed martial arts contest. So I think there are different things that are, whether it's written or unwritten, that are required of me. And the preparation is the number one thing that I can control. But yes, I don't have mixed martial arts experience that I can lean on. And I'm also not paid as an analyst, even though you might hear me provide some color at times, and you might hear certain things from me that you would classify as an opinion. Generally speaking, I'm supposed to stay in my lane, which is the fact lane, and give you the what, and the why and the how is what the analyst is supposed to be giving you. But yeah, I mean, I try to stay in my lane. I've taken boxing lessons. I've taken jujitsu classes. I hate jujitsu. I do not enjoy it. I love commentating it. I love what the grappling brings to the game. But yeah, man, that's kind of how I've tried to approach it. And, certainly if taking an amateur MMA fight or training was a prerequisite for the job or something that the UFC required of me, I would dive right into that. I would get my head scanned and I would go take a fight. But thankfully they're not asking me to do that, brother.
Yeah, and I think what you do is so important. You provide so much important background information about the training camps, who the guys have been training with leading up to the fight, and that's stuff that you really have to dig into the details and do your research to figure out. So I think that's tremendously valuable information. So thanks for always doing the research and the back end work to provide that for the broadcast.
Well, thank you, brother. No, it's a labor of love. I mean, that's like as trite as you can put it, but I think for a lot of us, we're trying to figure out how we can enjoy our jobs to the nth degree. And thankfully, when I was 16 or 17 years old, I kind of knew I wanted to work in sports. And here I am at 43, still working in sports. So, a big part of the process for me was just finding something that I liked. So thankfully, it doesn't really feel like work, but thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing with Modelo?
Dude, so I got to tell you this, man, and I hope your bloody elbow audience will hear me on this, right? This is the greatest promotion in terms of a grand prize that I have ever heard being offered to a sports fan of any kind. I don't have to tell you that Modelo is the official beer of the UFC. You've heard me say brewed for those with a fighting spirit for a long time. I sort of became synonymous with the brand when Ben Askren got knocked out by Jorge Masvidal, and I said, the Fight Clock is brought to you by Modelo. And then it became the fastest knockout in UFC history. So to be able to align with them on this promotion with DraftKings is pretty special. But I had to make sure that the messaging was clear, Danny. The grand prize winner is getting 2 floor seats to 10 pay-per-views. So it's not like you're just getting tickets to March Madness or the AFC Championship game or 2 tickets to the Super Bowl. You're getting fucking 10 pay-per-views. You're probably going to go to 15 championship fights in a calendar year. And that says nothing of all the behind the scenes stuff. They'll be with me in my hotel room as I do my voiceovers. You'll be with me on the ESPN set as I'm hosting UFC Live, behind the scenes with me at the ceremonial weigh-in. You'll get video of yourself doing a fighter walkout. There's all sorts of behind the scenes components to this package. But the core of it is that you are getting the VIP package of a lifetime. It's like Publishers Clearinghouse for a UFC fan, right? For a full calendar year, you're getting 2 floor seats to every pay-per-view we do. I mean, so for 10 pay-per-views over the course of a calendar year, you're going to be with us on the floor. And I don't know that this opportunity is one that's ever going to be offered again. I can assure you that it's never been offered in the past. And yeah, I mean, the grand prize winner basically is going to have the sports fan opportunity of a lifetime. April 9th, UFC 273 is when it all sort of closes out. But I'm excited to get to know these winners sort of intimately. And I would say whether you're a UFC fan who's never been to a live event or somebody who's been to 1 million pay-per-views, this is the grand prize of a lifetime. And whoever has the skills to sort of put forth the best lineup on April 9th is going to be richly rewarded.
Wow, yeah, I couldn't agree more. That sounds like the best prize package ever. Couldn't be topped.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to get floor seats for a pay-per-view, like my twin brother has been to 1 pay-per-view on the floor, but 10 times, I mean, you're going to get Dana White's going to recognize you by the end of the year. Of that, I can assure you. So we're excited, we're excited to get this thing launched. It's officially launched now. And again, you go to DraftKings.com/Modelo. Anybody in the 50 states can enter. You don't have to be in a state where you are allowed to bet on sports online. All 50 states are eligible, and we will have 1 grand prize winner at the end of it.
That's amazing. DraftKings.com/Modelo. I'm definitely going to go put my entry in after we get done talking. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Just a huge fan of the work you do at the UFC and everything you do with the Anik and Florian podcasts. You guys are 2 of my favorite broadcasters in the sport. So it really means a lot to me that you took the time to chat with me today.
Well, hey, man, the words from you mean a lot to me. Keep doing what you guys are doing. I've been banging your site for years, clicking. So I appreciate the time and hope to see you at a live event soon, brother.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks again.